Today's show brought to you by redcon1.com. That's right. Click the link at the bottom of the podcast app in which you are listening to this on. Check them out. Use promo code T20 Quartermiss. That's right. redcon1.com.
There's nothing special about being American. None of you can define for me what an American is.
I am the nation. I was born on July 4th, 1776, and the Declaration of Independence is my birth certificate. The bloodlines of the world run in my veins because I offered freedom to the oppressed. I am many things and many people. I am the nation. I am 200 million living souls and the ghost of millions who have lived and died for me. I am Nathan Hale and Paul Revere. I stood at Lexington and fired the shot heard round the world. I'm Washington, Jefferson, Patrick Henry. I'm John Paul Jones, the Green Mountain Boys, Davy Crockett. I'm Lee.
Coming to you from the D-Tom Studios in the free state of Florida, sponsored by Maker's Mark Bourbon. This is Don't Tread on America. Then, how's everybody doing out there today? It is Thursday, April 16th, 2026. How y'all doing? I know it's been a minute. Listen, here's the deal. There he goes with more fucking excuses to bring this goddamn show. Yeah. I'm working out of town this week. Okay, today was a short day. I was actually home at a decent time. I'm bringing you a show. When I'm working out of town, I basically get home just in time to eat, take a shower, and go to bed. That's literally, I have maybe 3 hours when I walk in the door till when I need to go to bed because I get up at 11 o'clock at night. So, F and U. You want to start paying money for the show? I'll be here 5 fucking days a week. All right? That's how it is. Guys, I do apologize. I do have a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about, and this is going to be a different show because I feel like a lot of you guys are getting tired of the bullshit that we've been talking about for the past month or so. So I'm flipping the script on you. This is going to be strictly conspiracy-based, okay? But since the shows are erratic, the best way to do this is follow the show on social media. Don't Tread on America on Facebook, Instagram, True Social, and TikToker. And, of course, on the Twitter X Machine, DTOM Podcast 1776. Also, following on whatever podcast app you're listening to this on, you follow the show, you subscribe, whatever that button is. There's no charge, there's no Patreon, there's nothing like that. None of that bullshit. Also, subscribe to the Rumble channel, Don't Tread on America TV. You'll get updates, you'll get show notifications, you'll get all that fun stuff. It'll be pushed to your phone, and you'll get to see me, the inner workings of the DTOM studio. And if you're not on social media, you know what? That's fine. Go to the website, don'ttreadonamerica.com. And if you have any questions, concerns, ideas, anything you think I should talk about, hit me up, Don Q at don'ttreadonamerica.com. But right now, I'm going to crank it up with a little bit of Damn Yankees. I know you've been missing this. Don't Tread on America version, courtesy of one Ted Theodore Nugent. Yeah. Guys, we're going to talk about the assassination. No, not Charlie Kirk. No, nothing current. We're going back. We're going back 160 years. We're going to talk about Abraham Lincoln's assassination. Is what we learned in the history books really what happened? I don't know. Of course, we're talking conspiracies, so it's not. America. Come on. All right, welcome back, guys. I'm back to Don't Tread on America, the podcast where we don't just question authority. We put it on the stand, shine a spotlight, and ask the tough questions the gatekeepers don't want to answer. Of course, I'm your host, Don Q, coming to you from the heart of the Republic. And today we're diving deep, I mean real deep, into one of the most pivotal moments in American history that still echoes through our financial systems today, our government, and our freedoms. This episode is going to be a good one, guys. We're going to talk raw truth, official history, every major conspiracy angle, the ones they laugh at in the mainstream, and the ones they just won't die because the pieces don't add up. We're covering the Lincoln assassination from every angle. The night at Ford's Theater, John Wilkes Booth's small circle of Confederate plotters, the missing diary pages, the banking wars, greenbacks versus the international money power, Stanton's role, escape theories, and yes, the big one that gets people canceled very fast, the possibility of a deeper cabal involving powerful financial families who saw Lincoln as a direct threat to their control of America's money. Remember, guys, just because something isn't confirmed by the official narrative doesn't mean the government isn't hiding information. History is written by the victors, and governments have lied before about wars, experiments, and of course assassinations. We keep an open mind here. Unconfirmed doesn't equal untrue. We examine the evidence, the gaps, the patterns, and we'll let you decide. We'll hit the official story hard, then open the floodgates to every conspiracy we discussed. From Confederate revenge to radical Republican plots, Booth faking his own death, and especially the banking angle. How Lincoln's greenbacks challenged the debt-based system, and why some researchers involving... Hold on, I gotta stop here. I'll read back in a second. Hang tight. I want to hit my other intro. Including claims involving the Rothschilds family as having motive, means, and opportunity. We'll include supporting articles, quotes from old speeches, and references to documentaries, I should say, like the Money Masters that lay out the financial war behind the scenes. Stick with me, guys. We're going to do 3 commercial breaks to keep the lights on, mainly to keep Alp in my mouth. And we're going long because this story deserves it. So let's get started here. Just hang tight. I need to take a sip of my whiskey, and we'll get cranking here. Hang tight. You're welcome. All right, guys. Let's start with what the history books teach. April 14th, 1865. Just days after Lee surrendered at Appomattox. Lincoln is at Ford's Theater watching Our American Cousin. John Wilkes Booth, a famous actor and fiery Confederate sympathizer, slips into the presidential box, fires a derringer into the back of Lincoln's head, slashes Major Rathbone, jumps to the stage shouting, "Sic semper tyrannis," thus always to tyrants, and flees. Lincoln is carried to the Peterson house and dies the next morning. Booth and David Harold escape into Maryland and Virginia. Booth is cornered in a barn near Port Royal, Virginia, on April 26. The barn is set on fire. Booth is shot and dies. 8 conspirators are tried by military tribunals. 4 hang, including Mary Surratt. And Booth's motive was pure Southern rage over defeat, emancipation, and Lincoln as a tyrant. His diary entries rant about the Confederacy and compare himself to Brutus, not the barber, but, the one from, Julius Caesar. Co-conspirators targeted Stuart and Johnson too, a decapitation strike to throw the Union into chaos. Now, that's the official narrative. Eyewitnesses, trial records, physical evidence, it's solid on the surface. But as we dig, cracks do appear. Booth didn't act completely alone. There was a real plot involving Lewis Powell, who attacked Seward, George Atzerodt, assigned to Johnson but chickened out, and others tied to Confederate sympathizers. Some researchers point to possible loose ties with Confederate agents in Canada. But was it bigger? Theories immediately swirled. I love how I talk about stuff and my phone chimes in. The U.S. even tried to link it in court, but much of that testimony fell apart as perjury. Then there was the Edwin Stanton radical Republican angle, popularized in books like Otto Eisenschmill's Why Was Lincoln Murdered, claims that Stanton left the theater unguarded on purpose, controlled the investigation, and maybe even benefited from Lincoln's death because Lincoln was too soft on Reconstruction. The missing pages from Booth's diary, Stanton had custody of it. Some say he or his people removed them to hide involvement. But we'll talk more about those missing pages later. They're a real rabbit hole, guys. But before we dig deeper into the shadows, let's take a quick break, guys. So please hang tight for a second. All right, guys. If you're looking for a clean, discreet way to get your nicotine fix without smoke or hassle, check out Alp nicotine pouches. These things are smooth, long-lasting, and come in great flavors. No spitting, no smell, perfect for Patriots on the go. Go to outpouch.com/DTOM. Get killer discounts at checkout. Support the show. Stay sharp. We'll be right back. All right, guys, here's where it gets juicy. Booth carried a small 1864 datebook diary. When recovered from his body, multiple pages were missing. Estimates ranged from 18 to over 80, depending on the source. Booth himself tore some out during his escape to write notes begging for help. But the big gaps, they passed through many hands: Union officers, Lafayette Baker, and even Stanton himself. Forensic tests later found no invisible ink, but the contents are unknown. Conspiracy voices ask, what if those pages named higher paymasters? What if they revealed payments or instructions that didn't fit the lone Confederate zealot story? Some claim Booth escaped and the man killed in the barn was a look-alike. Body identification issues, missing photos, rumors he lived under aliases. The FBI even looked into this decades later, again unconfirmed. But the chain of custody and rush burial raised eyebrows. Governments hide inconvenient truths all the time. So now I want to dive into the financial war that some say was the real motive. Lincoln needed money for the Civil War. European bankers, allegedly led by the Rothschilds, offered high-interest loans. Instead, Lincoln pushed the legal tender acts and issued greenbacks. These were debt-free paper money printed by the Treasury, not borrowed from private banks, much like our money is now. Hundreds of millions in greenbacks helped fund the Union without massive interest payments. After his death, greenbacks were curtailed. The National Banking Act entrenched a bond-backed system, and the path was paved for the Federal Reserve in 1913. You're talking roughly about a 50-year gap there. Researchers like those in the 1934 Ottawa speech by Gerald McGreer claimed international quote-unquote sound money. Bankers plotted Lincoln's death in Canada because greenbacks threatened their control. Books like Xavier Hayes' The Suppressed History of American Banking argued the Rothschilds fomented the Civil War and used Booth as a hired gun to eliminate Lincoln's independent money system. The Money Masters documentary lays out the long battle from the first and second banks of the United States. Then you have Jackson's bank wars, Lincoln's greenbacks to the Fed. It presents Lincoln as saying the bankers behind him were his greatest foe. The pattern? Well, Andrew Jackson survived an assassination attempt after killing the second bank. Garfield, who spoke about who controls the volume of money, McKinley, and JFK, Executive Orders 11110 on silver certificates, all clashed with monetary powers and met violent ends. Coincidence? Or a recurring threat to those who challenged debt-based central banking? Some versions go further, claiming a Jewish banking cabal, or Rothschild's family used Booth's very real hatred of Lincoln and emancipation as a perfect cover. Booth's Southern rage becomes the public story, while the financial strings stay hidden. We've seen official narratives shift throughout history when agendas demand it. Why not here? I'm not dismissing any angle just because it's unconfirmed. The missing pages, the custody chain, the financial motives, the pattern across presidents, these are questions worth asking. Powerful interests have influenced policy and events before. Follow the money, as they say. We've heard that before. Of course, Dan Bongino used to say it all the time, but, that's in the past, right, Dan? Anyway, we'll read excerpts from the 1934 speech, quotes from the Money Masters, and references to Hayes' book. Listen to how greenbacks work versus the debt system that we're stuck with today. But before we do that, let's get another commercial out of the way, guys. Hang tight. All right, so we're going to take a quick break to talk about staying free online. In this age of surveillance and data harvesting, you need protection. NordVPN is the gold standard, fast, secure, with thousands of servers worldwide. Mask your IP, bypass censorship, and keep your browsing private. Guys, don't let big tech or governments track your every move. Go to nordvpn.com, use promo code DTOM for a massive discount plus extra months free. Secure your freedom. We'll pick it up right after this. Hang tight. Okay, so let's address the most controversial layer head on, because we don't shy away here, guys. I don't care. Bring it on. Some researchers in older articles, including claims in certain foreign media or fringe histories, suggest the plot went even deeper. A sinister international financial network, often framed around prominent Jewish banking families like the Rothschilds, who allegedly needed Lincoln gone for challenging their influence over U.S. central banking ambitions. They point to Rothschild's loans to both sides of conflicts. Judah P. Benjamin, who was a Jewish Confederate cabinet member, and his ties, and that the idea that Booth's very public Confederate anti-emancipation motive served as ideal cover for a financial hit job. After Lincoln's greenbacks faded, and the system moved toward what became the Fed. Now, critics call this anti-Semitic, scapegoating, rooted in old tropes about Jews and money power. But, as we've said, absence of direct smoking gun documents doesn't prove absence from involvement, especially if a sophisticated cabal knows how to operate through cutouts and useful idiots like Booth. History has examples of hidden hands behind public actors. We present the claims as they exist in literature. 1930s speeches, certain books, online discussions. And we'll do this without knee-jerk dismissal. You decide if the pattern of financial opposition plus assassination attempts hold water, or if it's coincidence layered in real Confederate anger. We'll note supporting pieces like the New York Times report on the 1934 banker plot claim, references in alternative histories, and how some tie it to broader money masters' narratives. So, who benefited from Lincoln's death? Harder Reconstruction, or preserving a debt-based financial system? The missing diary pages, the rapid trial and executions, the handling of Booth's body, all fuel speculation that the full story was never told. Whether it's purely Confederate, Stanton and the radicals, international bankers using the chaos as cover, or layers of all three, the assassination changed America. It turned Lincoln into a martyr and altered the course of monetary policy for generations. Today, with central banks, endless debt, and endless inflation, these old battles feel relevant. Today, Junior. Question everything, guys. Research the money masters, Hayes' book, The Greenback History. Look at the presidential pattern. Don't let gatekeepers tell you what to think. I'm going to hit this last break, guys, real quick. Hang tight. All right, guys, last break. If I could find it. Hold on. I have it right here. I have it. Here it is. If you're tired of woke companies and want to support American-made products that actually deliver, grab my pillow. Mike Lindell's gear is the best sleep you'll get. Pillows, sheets, towels, you name it. They're durable, comfortable, and they stand for freedom. Use promo code DTOM at mypillow.com for special deals. Help keep independent voices alive while you rest easy. Back in a second. So, we've gone through the official story, and we've covered some of the small conspiracies. The diary mysteries, the escape rumors, the banking war, greenbacks, the presidential pattern, and every layer, including the deepest financial cabal claims. I don't claim to have the answers, but the gaps, the timing, the money trail, and the historical pattern demand that we keep digging. Guys, I just find it interesting. We've had 40, I guess technically 47 presidents. I guess realistically it's 46. If you count Trump, 45, 47, right? Okay. We've had assassination attempts or completions on, 5 of those individuals? And you can't help but ask the question, Andrew Jackson, prior to Lincoln, after the Revolutionary War, when the country was being developed, this was in the early 1800s, and these same entities, we'll call them entities, whether it was a Rothschilds, a cabal, whatever, tried to start what we know today as a Federal Reserve. Andrew Jackson didn't want no part of a central bank. Now, the idea of an American bank, a debt-free, government-controlled, essentially, bank. Now, a lot of people out here, if you're stumbling upon the show, you might think that that is what the Federal Reserve is. The Federal Reserve is not. The Federal Reserve is a privately owned bank that funds the United States financial systems. I've said this, we've talked about this kinda in the past. Pull out a dollar bill, a $5 bill, $20 bill, whatever you have. Notice it says Federal Reserve note. Doesn't say property of the United States of America. That is borrowed money. You might have that money in your pocket and you might think of it as your money. But it's not. You're kind of borrowing that money. You look at your W-2, or not even W-2, look at your paycheck every week. You actually pay a fee to the Federal Reserve every week, every month, however you get paid. And you have to wonder, and this is part of the conspiracy that falls into the whole Social Security numbering system that started around this same time in the early 1900s, where prior to, I think it was 1932, 3, somewhere around there, people born prior to that didn't have Social Security numbers. You weren't assigned a barcode at birth. That number that you get when you're born coincides with an account, essentially, through the Federal Reserve. And nothing bothers these people more than when you work for yourself. You ever notice how people that work for themselves are always subject to IRS? It's like they're robbing the system, because if you're Joe Schmo, the lawn guy, let's say, and you mow 100 yards a week, whatever, and you make a pretty good living doing that, but you insist that your customers pay you in cash because there's no evidence of that transaction. You're getting $25 a week, $100 a month, $150, whatever it is, from your 100 or so customers. You're doing all right. And if you get that paid in cash, there's no existence of you paying into the system. And that's basically what you're doing. Is if you're like me and most of the people probably listening to the show, you work for a job of some sort and you get a paycheck, and every week taxes are taken out and Social Security benefits are taken out and FICA is taken out. And FICA, what is that? Yeah, that's the thing. Because you don't ever see that FICA. Like, at least you could say, okay, my taxes are taken out. I paid X amount of dollars this year. I do my taxes, in February, March, whenever you do your taxes, and you get whatever back, or maybe you pay whatever because you didn't have enough taken out. And your Social Security benefits, every year you can check on your Social Security and see, okay, I've made, since I started working at whatever age to today, I've made X amount of dollars every year, and the lower numbers get taken out. And obviously, the longer you live, hopefully the more you make, increasing your Social Security benefits when you are of age to get those benefits. Some people get $1,000 a month in Social Security. They turn 65, 60, 67, whatever it is. And, maybe they worked menial jobs. Maybe they worked under the table. Maybe, they were waitresses or waiters or whatever and lived off of tips, but didn't really make a lot of money as far as the government was concerned. And thus you kind of pay for that when it's time for you to retire. And unfortunately, that's a system that was put in place in the 60s to encourage you to be dependent upon the government. And your punishment for doing those types of jobs, whether you took cash money, you were a waitress, waiter, you lived on tips, whatever that is. And I'm not demeaning anybody that does that job. If you're a waiter or a waitress and you work at a decent restaurant, you're making a decent amount of money in tips. Let's say you're making $800 a week in tips. You work at a pretty decent restaurant. Your paycheck might only show that you've made, $200 that week, because that's your clocking in. I worked X amount of hours at $4 or whatever they get paid now, as far as waiters and stuff go. I waited tables when I was younger, and I think it was like $2.25 or some shit like that an hour, And then I was told, just claim your tips up to minimum wage. So if you worked, I was like part-time, I was in school, so it was like, if you worked 20 hours at $2 an hour, I think minimum wage was like $4.25 back then. So you just claim, $20 or 20 hours times another $2.25 an hour. So you claim like $40 something in tips. And I might have made $200 or $300 that week. And that's how they do it. Now, of course, Trump comes out, no tax on tips. But that helps, but it doesn't help. It only really helps the people that work at places, at restaurants that most of these transactions, most of the time when you go out to eat, when I go out to eat, I don't use a credit card, but I use a debit card. So it's still a electronic payment, right? Therefore, that waiter or waitress can't say, I made $20, $25, whatever off that table. But the government knows about it because it was electronic. Your best bet, realistically, when you go out to eat is, if it's a place you frequent, you know how much you're going to spend about this much money on dinner. We usually leave a $20, $30 tip is to take cash to pay that tip, because you're actually helping the waiter or waitress out in that sense. But now there's no tax on tips, but that's only going to last a couple years. It's not, it's good for now, but not great forever. But anyway, so back in the 30s when they initiated the Social Security situation and everyone was assigned a number, if you ever knew anybody that was born in early 1900s, they didn't have that number. They weren't assigned a bank number. I think subsequently, if they were born in, say, 1920, let's say, and then they started working in 1936, so on and so forth, they had to obtain a number. Therefore, they had to be put into the system. But so these people that work for cash or work for very little money but make a lot of cash on the backside get punished in the long run, because, it is what it is. Most people nowadays don't work for businesses, don't work for corporations that offer pensions. Those are a thing of the past. Some companies still do it. I'm fortunate to work for one that I actually have a pension through. But I also put money into my 401k and I buy stock. Sometimes even those options aren't available depending on where you work. And it's up to you to save for that time in life. Because the misnomer is a lot of people that waited tables. Let's just use that for an example. Or run lawn services or trees trimming or whatever the case may be. You might have lived in the past of thinking, well, my dad or my grandfather retired and they had money and they were fine. The thing is if you don't pay into the system, I'm not encouraging this. I'm encouraging you to save money is what I'm encouraging you to do. But, and I'll use my mom as an example. My mom worked earlier in her life. Her and my dad owned a delicatessen when we lived in Chicago. And she never really got a paycheck. Most of her income was through the restaurant. And that hurt her in the long run. Then she worked jobs after my parents got divorced. She had regular jobs for, I don't know, probably 20 years or so. And her husband she's divorced again now, but her husband at the time worked a good job and he was making good money. So she was like, I'm going to retire. She retired at, 60 or something like that. She retired relatively young because she didn't really need to work. But subsequently, they got divorced. She's having to what she was getting alimony up until recently. My stepfather, ex-stepfather, what do you want to call him, retired, and that went away. But nonetheless, she her Social Security per month was like $1,100. Who in the hell can live off of $1,100 a month? Right? And that's kind of the punishment for not putting into the system. Because they encouraged corporations, I don't know, probably about 30, 40 years ago to get away from pensions for the company, because the company provides for the pensions. They encourage the companies to get away from that and start 401ks through your bigger companies. I remember I worked for Walmart, and I don't know, it was probably late 90s. They had what they didn't have pensions, but they had a thing called profit sharing. So every year the company made whatever in profit. It was divided up basically amongst its associates, however many associates throughout the company. And it was basically, just to make it simple, put into a bank account for you. Okay? And that number grew. There was plenty of people that worked for Sam Walton back in the 60s and 70s that retired in the 80s, 90s that were millionaires. Just regular, cashiers or stock clerks or whatever. And it was because of that. Well, after Sam Walton died, a few years after that, they went away from the profit sharing, and then they took whatever money you had in your profit sharing. Let's say you had $10,000, and they put that money, whatever that dollar amount was, into 401k, and then you set up a 401k, and then whatever that balance was that you put into it, that was your starting point. Then from that point forward, you could put in 1, 2, 3, 5, whatever percent, and the company matched, I think, 5 or 6%, whatever it was. And that was the company's way to encourage you to save. But, what's 5 or 6%? I mean, theoretically, you need to put in 10 plus % to make it worth your while when you retired. Also, you're beholden to the stock market at that rate. And a lot of people lost money a couple of different times over the past 20, 30 years in the stock market, and it hurt their 401k. But also, if the stock market is doing well, it helps your 401k. So your 401k, your retirement investment is based on the stock market. That is also controlled by these same individuals. So, I guess essentially what I'm trying to say is 160 over the past, let's just say over the past 200 years, we've had presidents, just a handful, that didn't agree with this system. And who's to say that if Jackson or Lincoln or Garfield or any of these, McKinley, if any of these individuals were right, that things would be better? We don't know that, obviously. But it is interesting to know that the inflation that we've seen in this country. I'm not even talking about Joe Biden or what's going on right now with Trump. I'm talking over the past 200 years of this country, or let's say the past 100 years since the Fed has stuck its ugly little nose into our business, constantly goes up. You go to a they have a calculator online you can go to, and it's about not interest. It's about whatever the hell we were just talking about. And a dollar in 1940 versus a dollar today, right? You've heard that. Well, in 1950s money, $100,000 today is $1 million or whatever, because of the inflation rate and stuff like that, right? And it's like, I understand people make more money nowadays than they did then, and costs go up, and I get all that. But you can't help but wonder if these banks, these Federal Reserve banks, which, if you bank at Bank of America, these banks are all tied together into this same situation. And what's more concerning is, even today, you look at Trump and they're talking about they want to go to a central digital banking and all this stuff. It's not better. It's probably worse, or it's equally as bad, if not worse. Let's put it that way. Because some of the conspiracies, some of the thoughts that me and Chris have over this is, you have no cash money. Everything's done digitally, which most of us do that anyway. Most of us use debit cards or credit cards or whatever. So there is always that digital fingerprint, whatever print you want to use there, that is keeping track of your spending. Well, that's what makes me curious about them wanting to get rid of cash. Now, they're trying to sell it in a sense of getting out of a central banking or a Federal Reserve type situation. But you can't imagine that it would be any better. Isn't it so much nicer that if you want to stash some cash and you're able to put, $20 a week, 50, 100, whatever bucks a week away, and you have your little stash, whether it's a couple $100 or a couple $1,000, just in case of emergencies, right? But what if that money's no good all of a sudden? What if all of a sudden they say, we're no longer doing this, we're going to this? Back in the 30s, they went around and basically confiscated anyone that had gold. Now, how did they know if you had gold or not? I don't know. But they took it. Who's to say they don't do the same thing with what you think is your wealth, your money, your cash? It's because you've been tracked ever since you were born, and more importantly, ever since you started working. So if you were 14, 15, 16, whatever, and you started working, you were bagging groceries, you're working at McDonald's or whatever, and you filled out your application, you put your social security number on there, and you're making your money every week, and Uncle Sam's taking his share, and FICA's taking their share, and you're contributing to social security. You were being tracked the whole time. And then when you turn 60 whatever years old and you're going to retire and you didn't make that much money, you're not going to get that much money. But maybe you did make money because you were doing odd jobs or whatever the case may be. This all started back with Andrew Jackson's fight against a central banking situation from foreign banking entities. And it went away, and then it revived when Lincoln was in office. Now, you could also kind of put the blame on Lincoln for income tax, because prior to 1960 or 1864, there was no income tax. There was no IRS. There was none of that. He initiated a wartime version, I guess, of the IRS, and they collected income tax from the people to help pay for the Union for the war. And there's a lot of misnomers about what the Civil War was about. We are taught in school that whole situation had to do with slavery. That was just a part of it. The basis of the Civil War was over states' rights, and that was part of it. People didn't want to pay the government. People didn't want the government involved in their state's situation. We talked about this during COVID with all the mandates and all the bullshit. And it coincides with what happened in 1864. Now, to Lincoln's credit, once the war ended, prior to his death, he put an end to that. But sure enough, 50 years later, they reinitiated it under Woodrow Wilson. And it was around this time, from 1913 to 1933, where they instituted the Federal Reserve, Social Security system, and income tax. And you were tracked ever since then. Now you'll hear people say, "Well, nowhere in the Declaration or in the Constitution does it say anything about income tax. Taxes are illegal," and that was the whole thing. Okay, what are you going to do about it? You can't make that argument 100 and something years later. You should have made that argument 100 years ago when this whole system started. But no, we just went about it because life's good, America's great, blah, blah, blah. And I would say to the countries outside of America who are doing this same thing nowadays, probably can point to America for that. Because the countries around the world saw the prosperous nation of America and what they were doing and said, we want a part of that. So they started doing similar things. Now, is this a Jewish Rothschilds banking cabal? Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe they're just a part of it. I don't know. I think the key to all of this is we can look at the assassinations of presidents in the past. And every single one, the ones that Garfield, McKinley, Lincoln, and JFK, the ones that were killed, all opposed the system that we're in now. And they all were murdered because of it. Forget about the official narrative. Forget about Booth. I'm not saying Booth wasn't involved. Okay? I'm not saying Oswald wasn't involved. I'm not saying that these people weren't involved. I'm also not saying that they were lone assassins or, Booth, by all accounts, from what we were told, I wasn't there, did what he did. But was he so brazen just because of the Civil War, just because of emancipation? Was it just because of that? Or, like I said, was it that he was that crazy and these people saw that and chose to use that to their advantage? Fast forward 100 years later to Oswald. His hatred for the government, his hatred for Kennedy, his hatred for the things that he was doing with Cuba and all this stuff had nothing to do with anything else. They used him to be involved. Whether he pulled the trigger and he was the lone assassin, I highly doubt that was the case. Do I have proof? Hell no. Why? Because I don't control the narrative. The people that don't want you to know are the ones that are controlling the narrative. So how in the hell could we ever find out the truth? Never going to find out the truth. Even though the truth was supposed to be exposed when Trump was elected. Still waiting. You're never going to know. That's why it's shows like this and shows that do these things, they'd have to keep the thought alive and keep you asking the questions and doing your research. Now, granted, I'll say it's not easy because, once again, the the message, the history, the information is controlled by the people that don't want you to know. So you have to use your own eyes and your own thought process, and you got to think, could these individuals do this on their own? I'm venturing a guess to no. Now, maybe with Lincoln, it was probably a little easier because there was no Secret Service. That stuff didn't exist back then. But when you have entities that should have been killed also, that weren't, but then were also involved in the investigation, you have to ask the question, is that where the conspiracy starts? The person that was leading the investigation was one of the three that was supposed to be killed that night, and he wasn't. Well, Don, they used him because he was so pissed and da-da-da-da. Okay, maybe. Or maybe that part of the story is a lie. You mean to tell me that there was 3 guys going to kill 3 important political figures of the time, and one of them chickened out all of a sudden? Or was that part of the quote-unquote history, the narrative that they needed to tell school kids from that point forward? Was he involved? And keep him alive for the cover-up. Unconfirmed doesn't mean the government or powerful private interest aren't hiding pieces. They've done it before, they're doing it now, and they're going to keep doing it until I'm dead, you're dead, and your kids are dead, and their kids are dead. But what do you think happened? That's the question we have to ask here. And I'm curious. I'm sorry. I'm curious to see what you guys think. Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you're watching this on Rumble, if you're listening to whatever podcast app, share this episode and keep questioning. Guys, subscribe, support the sponsors, use those promo codes, and stay vigilant. If you don't want to comment on the Apple or Spotify or whatever, that's fine. Email me, donq@don'ttreadamerica.com. Follow the show on social media, Don't Tread America, on Facebook, Instagram, True Social, and the Ticker Talker. And, of course, on the Twitter X machine, D-Tom Podcast 1776. There you can question, you can ask, you can message me privately if you don't want people to rag you and jump on your shit. I get it. Just let me know what you guys think about this. If there's anything I missed, we can talk about this later. This isn't over. I've told you everything that I could find from a conspiracy angle, and that's kind of how it is. But maybe I missed something. It's possible. Guys, that is all I have for you today. It's Thursday, April 16th. Hopefully you guys filed your taxes, because God forbid, right? You guys have a great day. I'll probably be back either Saturday or Sunday. I got another show for you. Other than that, that's all I got for you guys. Don't forget, this is Don't Tread America. Liberty or death. Never forget. Until next time, stay free. Peace.